The flames licked the night sky like the tongues of vengeful spirits, casting jagged shadows across the crumbling stone walls of Eldridge Keep. Smoke coiled through the air, thick and acrid, carrying the bitter tang of charred wood and something far more primal, fear, sweat, and the metallic whisper of blood. Elara's lungs burned as she stumbled through the inferno, her bare feet blistering against the heated flagstones. The castle, once a fortress of iron-willed lords, now groaned under the assault of fire, its towers silhouetted against a moonless void, as if the stars themselves had fled in terror. She was no stranger to pain, but this was a symphony of agony, each crackle and roar pulling at the frayed edges of her resolve. Her gown, once a cascade of midnight silk, hung in tatters, singed and clinging to her skin like a second layer of torment. In her arms, she clutched a small bundle, a tattered cloak wrapped around the only remnant of her shattered life. The cries of the dying echoed behind her, mingling with the triumphant howls of the invaders who had breached the gates at dusk. Werewolves, they called them in the old tales, but Elara knew better. These were the Shadow Pack, feral enforcers of the fractured kingdom, their eyes glowing like embers in the gloom. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, not just from the chase, but from the curse that stirred within her veins. It had always been there, a latent fire, since the night her mother whispered warnings by candlelight. The blood of the ancients runs hot in you, child. It will save you or consume you. Elara had dismissed it as folklore until the first vision came, flames dancing in her dreams, promising power if she dared embrace it. Now, as the heat intensified, she felt it awaken, a searing pulse that made her vision blur with unnatural clarity. The fire wasn't just destroying, it was calling to her. A beam collapsed overhead with a thunderous crack, sending sparks swirling like malevolent fireflies. Elara ducked, her breath hitching as embers singed her hair. She pressed on, weaving through the labyrinth of corridors that twisted like the veins of a dying beast. The keep's heart, the grand hall, lay ahead, or what was left of it. Tapestries of heroic battles hung in ruins, their threads devoured by the blaze, releasing ghosts of glory into the smoke. She could almost hear the echoes of feasts long past, laughter swallowed by the roar. But there was no time for nostalgia. Footsteps thundered behind her, heavy, deliberate, the pads of paws on stone. The Alpha's hunters. She had seen their leader once from the safety of the battlements, Thorn Blackthorn, the Alpha King, his fur as dark as oblivion, eyes like forged steel. Rumors painted him as a monster who devoured souls, yet whispers among the servants spoke of a man burdened by an ancient pact, one that bound him to protect the realm from threats like her. Or was it to claim her? The visions had shown her to him in fragments, a woman wreathed in fire, her touch both salvation and doom. Elara burst into the hall, the air here a furnace, waves of heat distorting the space like a mirage. The massive oak doors at the far end stood ajar, promising escape to the wild moors beyond. But between her and freedom loomed a figure, silhouetted against the blaze. Not a hunter, but something worse, a guardian of the keep, one of the cursed knights sworn to the old bloodline. His armor gleamed dully, etched with runes that glowed faintly orange, but his face was a mask of charred flesh, eyes milky with undeath. "You cannot leave," he rasped, voice like grinding gravel. His sword rose, flames dancing along its edge, as if eager to taste her. "The fire claims all traitors." Elara's fingers tightened on her bundle, the cloak warm against her chest. Too warm, pulsing with a life that wasn't hers. It was the heirloom, the crystal shard her mother had died protecting, said to hold the key to breaking the kingdom's endless wars. If the Shadow Pack claimed it, Thorn's reign would be unchallenged, the packs united under his iron paw. But if she escaped? The knight lunged, his blade whistling through the smoke. Elara dodged, her body moving with an instinct she didn't recognize. The curse surged, and for a heartbeat her skin prickled as if flames licked inward, granting her speed beyond mortal limits. She rolled aside, the sword embedding in the floor with a sizzle. Grabbing a fallen candelabrum, its arms still alight, she swung it like a flail. Wax and fire met armor, eliciting a howl of pain that was almost human. The knight staggered, but more shadows stirred in the periphery. Hunters closing in, their growls vibrating through the stone. Elara's mind raced, the heat coiling tighter in her core. She couldn't fight them all. Not yet. With a desperate cry, she hurled the candelabrum at the knight's feet, igniting a fresh blaze that bloomed like a predatory flower. Flames roared up, forming a wall between her and her pursuers, fed by her will alone. The air shimmered, the fire bending to her unspoken command, a barrier of living inferno. She ran, the bundle clutched to her breast, bursting through the doors into the night. The moors stretched before her, a sea of heather and mist under a sky bruised purple. Wind whipped her face, cool at last, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine. But freedom was fleeting. Howls pierced the darkness, closer now, the pack in pursuit. As she crested a hill, stumbling into a thicket of ancient oaks, a new presence loomed. Not the hunters, but something immense, a shadow detaching from the trees. Golden eyes fixed on her, unblinking, the alpha's form half man, half beast, muscles rippling under midnight fur. Thorn. He didn't advance, but his gaze held her, piercing the veil of her fear. In that moment, the curse within her resonated. A thread pulling taut between them, destiny's cruel knot. Elara froze, the fire's echo still warming her skin as the world narrowed to those eyes. Escape through fire the visions had promised. But at what cost? The howls grew louder, and Thorn's lips curled back, revealing fangs that gleamed like promises of both ruin and rescue. She backed away, heart fracturing, knowing the night had only begun to claim her. The mist clung to the ancient oaks like a shroud, weaving through gnarled branches that clawed at the bruised sky. Elara's breath came in ragged gasps, the cool night air a balm against the fire's lingering scorch on her skin. But the warmth within her stirred restlessly, a serpent uncoiling in her blood, responding to the massive form before her. Thorn Blackthorn stood or loomed, like a storm-given flesh, his hybrid shape a testament to the wild's unforgiving grace. Fur as black as raven wings rippled over corded muscles, and those golden eyes held not the feral hunger of his pack, but a piercing intelligence that stripped her bare. Fangs glinted in the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy, yet he made no move to pounce. Instead, he tilted his head, nostrils flaring as if scenting the embers that still clung to her. The howls shattered the fragile silence, a chorus of primal fury echoing from the moors. Drawing nearer with each heartbeat, Elara's grip tightened on the bundle, the crystal shard within pulsing like a second heart against her ribs. It hummed faintly, resonating with the curse's fire, as if urging her to run or fight. Her legs trembled, rooted by exhaustion and that inexplicable pull, a thread of fate woven from visions she couldn't shake. In her dreams, he had been both hunter and harbinger, his touch igniting her power rather than extinguishing it. But dreams lied, and this was no reverie. This was the edge of oblivion. "You run from flames you command." Thorn's voice rumbled, low and gravelly, carrying the timbre of thunder trapped in a man's throat. He shifted slightly, claws scraping the earth, but his gaze never wavered. "The fire bends to you, Elara of the old blood. Why flee what calls you home?" She recoiled, the name on his lips a violation, intimate and invasive. How did he know? The servant's whispers, the visions, had they reached even him? Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The Shadow Pack's raid wasn't random destruction. It was a hunt for her, for the shard that could shatter his fragile empire or forge it anew. "Stay back," she whispered, voice cracking like dry leaves underfoot. The air between them thickened, charged with the scent of pine sap and smouldering earth, her skin prickling as if the mist itself recoiled from their proximity. Thorn's lips curled, not in threat, but in something akin to wry amusement, though sorrow shadowed his eyes. The pack senses your power. They come for the prize you carry, and for you. He glanced toward the howls, now a cacophony splitting the night, betas and enforcers crashing through the underbrush. Leaves rustled violently, branches snapping like bones. Elara's pulse thundered in her ears, the curse flaring hot, painting her vision with flickers of orange. She could feel it building, a pressure behind her eyes begging release, but unleashing it here in this tangled wood might consume the oaks, the mist, everything, including him. A snarl erupted from the shadows to her left, and a lithe form burst forth. A beta wolf, silver-furred and snarling, eyes wild with loyalty to the alpha it challenged. It lunged not at her but at Thorn, jaws wide, driven by the pack's bloodlust for the ancient relic. Thorn met it mid-air, a blur of black and silver, claws raking fur as they tumbled into the ferns. The impact shook the ground, Elara stumbling back against an oak's rough bark, splinters biting into her palms. Growls and yips filled the air, wet and vicious, the metallic tang of blood blooming sharp and immediate. She should run, bolt into the moors, let the pack devour itself. But her feet wouldn't move. The curse wove visions unbidden. Thorn's form shifting fully to beast, then back to man, scars crisscrossing a broad chest, each mark a story of battles fought for a throne built on bones, and her, always her, standing at his side, flames dancing harmlessly around them like loyal hounds. Love, impossible. The seer in the keep had murmured once, a union of fire and fang that could heal the fractured lands or raise them to ash. The beta yelped, pinned beneath Thorn's weight, its throat exposed in submission. But more shadows stirred. 3, no 4, encircling the clearing, eyes glowing like scattered coals. Thorn rose, blood matting his fur, his hybrid form heaving with controlled rage. "Enough!" he growled, the command rippling through the air like a shockwave. The betas hesitated, whining low, their loyalty fracturing under his alpha will. Yet one, bolder or more desperate, leaped toward Elara, fangs bared for the bundle she clutched. Panic surged, and with it the fire. It erupted from her core unbidden, not as a wall this time, but as tendrils snaking from her fingertips. Lashing out like whips of molten silk, the beta howled as flames seared its flank, fur igniting in a brief, horrific blaze before it rolled away, whimpering. The others froze, hackles raised, the scent of singed hide mingling with the damp moss. Elara gasped, staring at her hands, unmarred yet tingling with residual heat. The power had obeyed her, wild and precise, but it left a hollow ache in her chest, as if it had taken a piece of her soul in payment. Thorn's eyes locked on hers, widening not in fear, but recognition. "The ancient's gift," he murmured, stepping closer, ignoring the cowering pack. The mist swirled around his paws, and for a moment his form blurred, man emerging from beast, fur receding to reveal tanned skin, etched with tribal tattoos that glowed faintly silver. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered, with hair like midnight spilling to his shoulders. Scars mapped his torso, tales of silver blades and moonlit curses. "It calls to mind. The pact binds us, Elara, fire and shadow, destined to clash or converge." The howls intensified, reinforcements crashing through the trees, their alpha's momentary mercy shattering under the pull of the hunt. Thorn extended a hand, calloused and steady, veins pulsing with the same restrained power she felt. "Come with me, or let them tear the shard from your corpse." Her heart fractured further, torn between the keep's ashes and this stranger's gaze, which promised not chains, but a mirror to her own hidden ferocity. The bundle burned against her, the crystals hum, a siren's song of sacrifice. With a sob caught in her throat, she placed her hand in his, warm, unyielding, and the world tilted as he scooped her up, bundle and all, his arms a cage of muscle and resolve. He shifted seamlessly back to beast form, powerful legs bunching as he bounded into the deeper woods. The pack's pursuit, a fading echo behind them. The wind tore at her hair, carrying whispers of pine and pursuit as they plunged into the heart of the ancient forest. Elara buried her face against his fur, the rhythm of his heart a drumbeat syncing with hers. Wild, unrelenting, escape through fire, yes, but now carried by fang. The night deepened, stars peeking through the canopy like hesitant witnesses, and in the cradle of his strength she felt the first stirrings of a dangerous hope. That destiny's knot might untangle into something whole, even as the shadows closed in. The forest swallowed them whole, a labyrinth of towering sentinels, whose roots twisted like the veins of forgotten gods, drinking deep from the earth's shadowed marrow. Thorn's paws thundered over moss-slick earth, each bound sending jolts through Elara's body, her fingers tangled in the coarse fur of his neck to steady herself. The bundle pressed against her chest, the crystal shard within vibrating with a low, insistent thrum that synced to the Alpha's pounding heart, a rhythm both alien and achingly familiar, like the echo of her own pulse amplified into something primal. Wind lashed her face, carrying the sharp bite of resin and the distant, acrid smoke from the keep's dying pyre, mingling with the musky warmth of his beast form. She could feel the heat of him seeping through her tattered gown, a counterpoint to the chill mist that beaded on her skin like tears. Pursuit clawed at their heels, the pack's howls fracturing the night into shards of urgency. They weren't giving up. The shard's power called to them as surely as it did to her curse, a beacon in the dark promising dominance or destruction. Elara's breath hitched, the fire in her veins simmering, restless, as if eager to lash out again, but exhaustion gnawed at her edges, the earlier outburst leaving her hollow, her limbs heavy as lead. In Thorn's grip she felt exposed, vulnerable not just to the hunters, but to the man beneath the fur, whose golden eyes had glimpsed the raw core of her without flinching. He veered sharply, crashing through a curtain of hanging vines that whipped like serpents, their leaves releasing a burst of earthy perfume, laced with something sweeter, almost floral. Night-blooming jasmine, rare in these cursed woods. The canopy thickened overhead, blotting out the stars, plunging them into a twilight realm where bioluminescent fungi pulsed faintly along the trunks, casting ethereal glows in blues and sickly greens. Thorn slowed, nostrils flaring, his massive frame tensing as he scented the air. A low growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating through her bones, and he lowered her gently to the forest floor, his claws careful not to graze her skin. As he shifted, the transformation was a fluid agony to witness, fur melting into flesh, bones reshaping with muffled cracks, until he stood before her as man, tall, scarred, his breath coming in visible puffs against the damp air. "We can't outrun them forever," he said, voice roughened by the change, eyes scanning the gloom. Moonlight dappled his features, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw and the faint silver tattoos that snaked across his collarbone, glowing faintly like veins of moonlight. He reached for the bundle, but she pulled it away instinctively, the crystal's warmth flaring in warning. His hand paused, respecting the boundary, though frustration flickered in his gaze. "That thing, it's poisoning you. The old blood in it reacts to your fire. I've felt its pull in dreams, Elara. It binds us both." She backed against a moss-covered boulder, the cool stone grounding her as her mind reeled. Dreams. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Her visions had shown him too, not as enemy, but as mirror, his shadow tempering her flame. Yet trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after the keep's betrayal, the flames that had taken her home and left her adrift. "You speak of bindings as if they're chains," she retorted, her voice steadier than she felt, laced with the embers of defiance. The air hummed with tension, the distant howls now a relentless tide, crashing closer, accompanied by the rustle of underbrush yielding to fangs and fury. Thorn's expression softened, a rare vulnerability cracking his stoic mask. He knelt before her, close enough that she could smell the wild on him. Pine, blood, and something deeper, like storm-soaked earth after rain. Not chains, a pact. My line was cursed by the ancients to guard the balance, shadow to contain the fire that could unmake the world. But you've awakened it in me. His fingers brushed her arm, tentative, igniting sparks beneath her skin that had nothing to do with her power. The touch was electric, stirring the curse to life, visions flashing unbidden, their hands entwined, flames and shadows dancing in harmony, healing the fractured packs and the war-torn lands. But threaded through it was loss, blood on his hands, tears on hers, a sacrifice to seal the bond. A snarl shattered the moment, erupting from the tree line. Two betas burst into the small glade, their forms sleek and lethal, eyes burning with feral need. One lunged for Thorn, jaws snapping, while the other circled Elara, hackles raised, fixated on the bundle. She scrambled back, heart slamming against her ribs, the crystal pulsing hotter, demanding release. Thorn met the first attacker with a roar, his body twisting mid-air, half shifting in a blur of muscle and claw. They collided in a whirlwind of fur and fury, teeth sinking into flesh, the wet rip of skin echoing like a profane prayer. Blood sprayed, warm and coppery, splattering the fungi and turning their glow crimson. Elara's world narrowed to the second beta, its breath hot and ragged as it prowled closer, muscles coiling for the strike. Fear coiled in her gut, but beneath it the fire rose, protective, vengeful. She thrust out her hand, willing the power not to consume but to shield. Flames bloomed from her palm, not wild inferno but a precise barrier, coiling like thorny vines around the wolf's paws. It yelped, recoiling as the fire singed without devouring, the heat a warning rather than a weapon. The beast whined, pawing at the ground, its advance halted by the unnatural blaze that bent to her command, illuminating the glade in flickering amber. Thorn dispatched his foe with a brutal twist, the beta crumpling lifeless to the moss, steam rising from its wounds in the cool air. He turned to her, chest heaving, blood streaking his face like war paint. The second wolf fled into the shadows, its whimpers fading, but the howls swelled anew, more coming, drawn by the scent of battle. "You're learning," he said, awe threading his voice as he wiped blood from his lip. But his eyes darkened with sorrow, the weight of the night pressing down. "Each use of it costs you. I can see it, the fire's eating at your light." She met his gaze, the bundle heavy in her lap, the crystal's hum now a lament. In that shared breath, amid the metallic tang of blood and the smouldering scent of her flames, something shifted, a fragile bridge forming between fire and shadow. He offered his hand again, and this time she took it, rising on trembling legs. The forest seemed to hold its breath as he pulled her close, his arm encircling her waist, a shield against the encroaching dark. Together they plunged deeper, the path narrowing to a vein of ancient stone steps, overgrown and whispering of ruins ahead. The howls pursued, relentless, but in his warmth, Elara felt the stirrings of resolve. Not just survival, but purpose. The curse wasn't a monster to flee. It was a key, and perhaps in his shadow she could turn it without breaking. Yet as the trees closed in, the crystal's pulse quickened, hinting at trials yet to come, betrayals within the pack, secrets buried in the ruins, and a choice that would demand everything. The night stretched on, a tapestry of peril and promise, weaving them tighter into its unforgiving embrace. The ancient stone steps descended like the spine of some colossal buried beast, slick with moss and etched by centuries of relentless rain. Each footfall echoed hollowly, swallowed by the oppressive hush of the forest that pressed in from all sides, branches interlacing overhead to form a vaulted ceiling of shadow and leaf. Elara's hand remained clasped in thorns, his grip a rough anchor amid the chill that seeped from the stones, carrying the faint mineral tang of underground rivers long forgotten. The crystal shard thrummed against her ribs, its warmth a persistent itch, sinking erratically with the Alpha's steady pulse, as if the artifact sensed the fragile alliance forming between its bearers, testing it with every beat. Thorn moved with predatory grace, his bare feet silent on the uneven path, muscles shifting beneath skin still marked by fresh gashes from the glade's skirmish. Blood had crusted along his arm, the scent sharp and metallic, mingling with the earthy dampness that grew thicker as they delved deeper. His breath came even, controlled, but Elara caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his golden eyes flicked to the encroaching gloom, ever vigilant. The howls had faded to a distant murmur, muffled by the earth's embrace, yet she knew the pack's tenacity. They were shadows woven into the night, drawn inexorably to the shard's siren call. "You feel it too," she murmured, her voice barely rising above the drip of water from unseen crevices. The words escaped unbidden, laced with the exhaustion that clawed at her edges. The fire within simmered low now, a banked ember rather than a blaze, but it left her hollowed, as if each summons drained not just strength, but fragments of her unscarred self. Visions flickered at the periphery of her mind, flashes of Thorn's past, not hers, a moonlit ritual where silver chains bound him to the pack's will, a lover's face dissolving into smoke, lost to the curse's hunger. She shook them off, but the intimacy of it unnerved her, this bleed of souls through touch. He glanced at her, his expression a mask of guarded intensity, the silver tattoos on his chest pulsing faintly in rhythm with the shard. "The bond stirs old wounds," he admitted, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through their joined hands. "The ancients forged it to unite fire and shadow against the void that birthed the endless wars. But pacts like this, they demand blood, yours, mine. The pack senses weakness in me for sparing you. They'll challenge it soon." Sorrow etched his features, deepening the lines around his eyes, and for a moment he was not the Alpha King, but a man adrift in the weight of destiny, his warmth a fleeting shield against the cold truth. The steps leveled out abruptly, opening into a vast chamber carved from the earth's heart, a ruined temple, its walls veined with luminescent quartz that cast a spectral blue light, illuminating faded murals of beasts and flames entwined in eternal dance. Vines snaked across cracked altars, their leaves whispering as if reciting lost incantations, and the air hung heavy with the scent of stale incense and decay, undercut by a sharper note, ozone, like the prelude to a storm. In the center loomed a pedestal, empty save for a shallow indentation shaped like the shard she carried, a cradle waiting to be filled, or a trap sprung. Thorn released her hand, stepping forward with cautious reverence. His claws, half emerged in his tension, scraping lightly against the stone. "This is the sanctum of binding," he said, tracing a rune on the wall that flared briefly under his touch, shadows coiling around his fingers like obedient smoke. "Here, the first Alpha sealed the pact with your bloodline's flamekeeper. The shard completes it, unites the pacts, ends the fractures, or unleashes chaos if wielded wrong." His gaze returned to her, heavy with unspoken plea. "Place it there, Elara. Let it end this hunt." She hesitated, the bundle's weight suddenly leaden, the crystal's hum rising to a feverish whine that echoed her fracturing resolve. Visions assaulted her anew, the shard igniting in glory, mending the kingdom's wounds, but at the cost of her freedom. Bound eternally to him, her fire tamed to serve the shadows, or refusing and watching the world burn as the pack tore it apart in their frenzy. "Love impossible," the seer's words echoed, a thorn in her heart. Thorn's nearness stirred it further, that pull, magnetic and merciless, promising solace in his arms even as it threatened to consume her whole. A tremor shook the chamber, dust sifting from the ceiling like ash from a dying fire. The howls returned, no longer distant but immediate, reverberating through the stone, as if the earth itself bayed. Thorn whirled, his body shifting partially, fur sprouting along his spine in defensive spikes. From the shadowed archway they had entered, figures emerged, not the feral betas, but 3 enforcers of the inner pack, their forms more man than beast, clad in ragged leathers etched with rival sigils. Led by a scarred female with eyes like chipped obsidian, her lips curled in betrayal's snarl. "The Alpha weakens," she spat, voice echoing with venom. "Carrying the Fire Witch? You've forsaken the hunt, Thorn. The shard is ours, by right of challenge." Thorn's growl built like thunder, shadows thickening around him, tendrils lashing out to probe the air. "Kara, stand down. This isn't your bid for power. It's madness." But she lunged, her claws extended, flanked by her allies who fanned out, encircling the pedestal. Elara's pulse roared, the fire surging in response, hot and insistent, painting the quartz veins in flickering crimson. She clutched the bundle tighter, stepping back as the chamber erupted into chaos, Thorn colliding with Kara in a frenzy of claw and fang, shadows clashing against her summoned illusions of jagged ice that shattered against the walls. One enforcer broke toward Elara, his eyes fixed on the shard with greedy hunger. She thrust her free hand forward, willing the flames not to kill, but to repel. A burst of heat that bloomed like a solar flare, slamming him back against the stone with a sizzle of singed flesh. He crumpled, gasping, the air filling with the acrid reek of burned hair and rage. The fire's recoil hit her harder this time, a vice around her lungs, vision blurring as if the power siphoned her very breath. Thorn roared in triumph over Kara, pinning her with a shadow-wreathed arm, but blood streamed from a gash across his ribs, staining the altar crimson. Kara laughed, wet and defiant even in defeat. "The pack sees your heart, Alpha, soft for the flame. She'll be your undoing." Her allies retreated, dragging their fallen, but the damage lingered, the betrayal a crack in the foundation. Howls swelling outside as more challenged the fragile peace. Thorn staggered to Elara's side, his hand finding hers again, slick with sweat and blood. The crystal's thrum peaked, the pedestal glowing in sync, pulling at them both like a tide. In his eyes, she saw the mirror of her turmoil, sacrifice looming, the bond demanding they yield to forge something greater or shatter utterly. The chamber's light dimmed, shadows and flames dancing in uneasy truce as the night outside howled for resolution. Elara's fingers trembled on the bundle, the weight of choice pressing down, a precipice where hope and ruin blurred into one. The quartz veins in the chamber walls pulsed like the arteries of a slumbering leviathan, their blue glow fracturing into shards of light that danced across the blood-smeared stone. Elara's breath caught in her throat, ragged and shallow, as the echo of Kara's laughter lingered, a venomous thread weaving through the heavy air. The scent of scorched flesh and spilled blood clung to everything, thick as the mist that seeped from hidden fissures, carrying the faint, underlying rot of the temple's forgotten ages. Her hand trembled in Thorn's, slick with his warmth and the sticky residue of battle, the contact sending jolts of shared power through her veins, fire licking at shadow, shadow tempering flame in a volatile embrace that both soothed and scorched. Thorn's chest heaved. The gash across his ribs, weeping crimson rivulets that traced the silver tattoos on his skin, each drop hissing faintly as it met the cooling air. His golden eyes, dimmed by pain, yet fierce with unyielding resolve, locked onto hers, mirroring the storm raging within her. The crystal shard thrummed against her breast, its hum a siren's wail now, insistent and intimate, as if it burrowed deeper into her soul with every heartbeat. Visions clawed at the edges of her mind, the pedestal igniting in a blaze of unity, Pax bowing under a healed realm, but Thorn's form crumpling beside her, his life the price of the seal. Or the alternative, her refusal unleashing the shard's fury, flames consuming the betrayers but leaving her alone in the ashes, forever marked by isolation's cold bite. "The choice is yours, Elara," he rasped, his voice a gravelly anchor amid the swelling howls that reverberated through the stone like the earth's own fury. Outside, the pack gathered, their cries a cacophony of challenge and hunger, drawn by the scent of weakness and the artifact's pull. Kara's betrayal had cracked the Alpha's authority, whispers of dissent rippling through the ranks like poison in a vein. He squeezed her hand, his calloused fingers gentle despite the blood, and in that touch she felt the depth of his curse, a loneliness etched into his bones, the weight of leading shadows that devoured their own. "The pack doesn't demand submission. It asks for trust. In me. In us." She searched his face, the lines of exhaustion and ancient sorrow carving him into something achingly human beneath the beast's veneer. The fire within her stirred, not in rage but in quiet recognition, coiling around the hollow ache left by her losses, the keep's inferno, her mother's whispered warnings, the life she'd fled. This man, this Alpha, had carried her from the flames, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian shadowed by his own demons. Yet trust was a fragile thing, born in the crucible of sacrifice, and the shard's glow intensified, bathing the pedestal in an ethereal light that made the murals seem to writhe, beasts and flames merging in ecstatic agony, a prophecy of convergence or cataclysm. A low rumble shook the chamber, dust cascading from the vaulted ceiling like grey snow, and the howls peaked into a frenzied crescendo. Shadows elongated unnaturally along the walls, coiling like living smoke as more enforcers breached the archway. 5 now, their forms a hybrid menace of fur and fury, eyes gleaming with opportunistic gleam. Kara, freed in the chaos, limped at their forefront, her obsidian gaze fixed on Elara with predatory triumph. "The fire which poisons him," she snarled, her voice echoing with the pack's collective venom, claws flexing as illusions of jagged thorns sprouted from the stone floor, lashing toward them. "We'll rip the shard free and end this farce. The Alpha's heart blinds him. No more." Thorn surged forward, releasing Elara's hand with a reluctant growl, his body shifting in a fluid ripple, fur erupting along his limbs, shadows exploding from his core like inky wings to deflect the thorns. He met the onslaught head-on, a whirlwind of claw and darkness, his roars mingling with the wet impacts of flesh yielding to fang. One enforcer lunged past him, straight for Elara, its jaws dripping saliva that sizzled on the stone. Panic flared, but so did her power, an instinctive bloom of flame from her core, tendrils snaking out to encircle the beast, not burning but binding, the heat sapping its strength until it collapsed, whimpering, steam rising from its pelt. The effort wrenched a gasp from her, knees buckling as the fire's toll deepened, a searing void gnawing at her chest, stealing breath she couldn't spare. She clutched the bundle tighter, the crystal's thrum sinking with Thorn's distant snarls, feeding her visions of their shared fate, his shadows weaving through her flames, mending the fractures in her spirit, even as the pack's betrayal tore at his throne. Kara circled, her illusions fracturing the quartz light into blinding prisms, one shard slicing across Elara's arm, a shallow cut that wept fire-tinged blood. The pain sharp and revelatory, awakening the curse's full depth. It wasn't just power, it was her essence, a rebirth forged in isolation's forge, demanding she embrace the bond, or perish alone. Thorn dispatched 2 more with brutal efficiency, shadows coiling around throats like nooses, but Kara struck true, a claw raking his flank, reopening the gash in a spray of blood that painted the altar. He staggered, golden eyes flashing to Elara amid the fray, a silent plea in their depths. The remaining enforcers closed in, the air thick with the metallic reek of violence and the ozone tang of clashing magics. Elara's resolve hardened, the fire surging not as weapon, but as bridge. She stepped toward the pedestal, the shard's pull magnetic, her free hand extending to Thorn even as he battled. "Together," she whispered, voice cutting through the din like a clarion. He broke free, shadows propelling him to her side in a blur, his bloodied form shielding her as Kara lunged once more. Elara placed the bundle on the indentation, the crystal slotting into place with a resonant chime that vibrated through the stone, awakening runes that blazed in dual hues, crimson flame and silver shadow. The chamber trembled violently, light erupting in a vortex that hurled the enforcers back, Kara's scream swallowed by the maelstrom. Power flooded Elara, intertwining with Thorn's essence through their clasped hands, a torrent of heat and cool darkness that knit her wounds and steadied his faltering stance, but at a cost, flashes of their pains merging, his lost loves echoing her solitude, her mother's death mirroring his cursed isolation. The vortex peaked, the murals igniting in holographic life, beasts and flames uniting to birth a new dawn, then subsided, leaving the chamber hushed, the pack's howls silenced outside as the pact's echo rippled through the earth. Kara lay crumpled, illusions shattered, her eyes wide with dawning fear. But the binding wasn't complete. The shard glowed brighter, demanding the final seal, a drop of mingled blood, a vow of sacrifice. Thorn's gaze met Elara's, heavy with the precipice they teetered on, love's impossible spark igniting amid the ruins. The night held its breath, the forest above stirring with unseen watchers, as destiny's knot tightened, promising redemption or ruin in the dawn's hesitant light. The chamber's quartz veins throbbed with a feverish rhythm, their blue luminescence fracturing into a kaleidoscope of crimson and silver as the shard's power unfurled like a living storm. Elara's skin prickled with the raw surge of it, the air humming with an electric charge that tasted of scorched metal and blooming nightshade, pulling at the frayed threads of her resolve. Her hand trembled in Thorn's, their mingled blood, hers fire-tinged and warm, his shadowed with the pack's ancient chill, dripping onto the pedestal in slow, deliberate rivulets. Each drop sizzled upon contact, sending ripples through the stone that echoed in her bones, a symphony of agony and awakening that blurred the line between pain and purpose. Kara stirred on the floor, her obsidian eyes narrowing to slits of defiance, the illusions of her magic flickering weakly like dying embers. The enforcers around her groaned, pinned by the vortex's fading tendrils, their fur matted with sweat and blood, the metallic tang sharp in the confined space. The pack's howls outside had hushed to a tense murmur, as if the forest itself awaited the verdict of this sanctum, the ancient temple holding its breath amid the scent of damp stone and smouldering runes. Thorn's grip tightened, his breath ragged against her ear, the heat of his body a bulwark against the chill seeping from the walls. "The vow," he murmured, voice roughened by the wounds that wept across his frame, shadows coiling lazily from his fingertips like reluctant smoke. "Speak it with me, Elara. Fire and shadow bound in balance, or we both unravel." She met his gaze, golden depths reflecting her own fractured light, and in that shared vulnerability, the curse within her uncoiled fully, not as a devouring blaze, but as a hearth's steady glow, illuminating the scars of her solitude. The visions had promised this precipice, sacrifice to forge unity, love's impossible flame, tempered by Fang's unyielding shadow. Her mother's warnings echoed faintly now, not as chains but as keys, the old blood no longer a burden, but a bridge. "I vow," she whispered, the words tasting of ash and honey on her tongue, "to yield my fire to the Shadow's Keep, to heal what wars have torn, in exchange for the strength to stand unalone." Thorn echoed her, his timbre deep and resonant, the pact sealing with a thunderous crack that shook the chamber, dust and light cascading like a veil torn asunder. The shard ignited, a supernova contained in crystal, its facets erupting in dual streams. Flames licking upward in sinuous spirals, shadows weaving through them like veins of midnight silk. The power crashed over them, a tidal wave of sensation, heat blooming in Elara's core, chasing away the hollow ache of her exertions, while Thorn's shadows cooled the fever, knitting flesh and spirit in tandem. But the binding demanded its toll. Pain lanced through her, sharp as a blade's kiss, as fragments of her past burned away, the keep's roaring inferno, her isolation's cold bite, the fear that had defined her flight. She cried out, vision blurring with tears that steamed on her cheeks, feeling Thorn shudder beside her, his losses surfacing in spectral flashes. Betrayed kin, a throne built on bones, the loneliness of an alpha's crown. Kara lunged then, seizing the moment of their vulnerability, her claws extended in a final bid for dominance. Shadows weakened by the pact faltered around the pedestal, allowing her to scramble forward, illusions reforming into barbed tendrils that lashed toward the crystal. "No!" Thorn roared, half-shifting in a blur of muscle and fury, intercepting her mid-stride. They collided with bone-jarring force, claws raking fur and flesh, the wet tear of skin mingling with Kara's guttural snarls. Blood sprayed anew, warm and coppery, splattering the glowing runes and eliciting a hiss as it mingled with the shard's energy. Elara staggered, the binding surge leaving her knees weak, but the fire responded instinctively, a whip of flame from her palm that coiled around Kara's leg, not to kill, but to bind, searing just enough to halt her advance. The enforcer howled, collapsing as the flame's restraint sapped her illusions, thorns withering to harmless wisps. Thorn pinned her fully, his shadow form looming, fangs inches from her throat, but mercy flickered in his eyes, sorrow for the pack's fracture, the betrayal born of his own divided heart. "Enough, Kara," he growled, the alpha command rippling through the air, compelling submission. She whimpered, eyes dimming from rage to resignation. The fight, draining from her as the pact's echo reached the outer pack, silencing their howls into a reverent hush. The enforcers bowed low, heads pressed to the stone, the air shifting from violence to uneasy accord, the scent of submission, sweat and earth, overpowering the blood. The vortex subsided, the shard dimming to a soft, harmonious pulse, its light bathing the chamber in a dawn-like glow that filtered through cracks in the ceiling, painting the murals in hues of rebirth. Elara sank to her knees beside Thorn, who shifted back to man, his wounds closing with ethereal threads of silver and crimson, leaving faint scars that mirrored her own, a thin line across her palm where their blood had fused, warm and permanent. He pulled her close, his arms encircling her with a tenderness that belied his strength, the musky warmth of him grounding her as the temple's hum faded to silence. In his embrace, the curse settled, no longer a wild tempest, but a shared flame illuminating the path ahead. Pacts united under balanced rule, wars quelled by their intertwined power, yet shadowed by the sacrifices etched into their souls. Outside, the forest stirred, first light piercing the canopy in hesitant shafts, gilding the mist with gold. Kara rose slowly, her gaze averted in deference, the pack dispersing into the woods like ghosts yielding to morning. Elara lifted her eyes to Thorn's, seeing not just the alpha, but the man who had carried her from fire's maw, destiny's knot untangled into a bond of quiet hope. A single tear traced her cheek, cool against the lingering warmth, and he brushed it away with a thumb scarred by battles past. In that touch, loss transformed to purpose, solitude to partnership, the impossible love blooming like the jasmine vines reclaiming the ruins. The dawn broke fully, whispering of renaissance as they stepped into the light together, the shard's echo a promise carried on the wind.